I'd like to introduce my good friend, Grant Couch Sensei, who will lead us in a presentation and hopefully a little bit of discussion about the three tenets today. So Grant, let me turn it over to you and I'll mute myself. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jeff. And it's great to be here. I think I'd like to start off with a minute or so of silence just to sort of gather ourselves before we start, if that's okay. All right, thank you. One of the things that, well, I just want to say I love talking about the three tenets, and I really appreciate the opportunity to sort of gather myself to join you guys to get you folks today. One of the things that I remember when Bernie was with us, he would start off a talk sometimes to see or to ask for, based on his great book, Instructions to the Cook, to see what the ingredients were for today's offering. And that the ingredient that he would be looking for, and one I'm asking for now, is if anyone has any questions that they've brought today that they'll want to make sure we get addressed. Love to hear those now. If there aren't any and you're just open to what happens, that's great too. But if anyone has any questions or areas they want to make sure we explore, this is a great time to let me know. Otherwise, I'll just sort of roll into it. Don't see any hands. So Grant,
David Birnbaum has.
Cool. David, please.
I didn't come with this. It just, as you were asking the question, it arose in me. I'm interested in the space, the time between not knowing and bearing witness and taking action. That space between.
Got it. I love it. I think we can have some fun with that too. Thank you, David. So for me, the three tenets are Bernie's greatest gift. And I'll just repeat them now, simply of not knowing, bearing witness, and taking action. Three tenets, 6 words. It's very simple. I first heard the three tenets, first consciously became aware of them anyway, when I met Bernie in Krakow in 2010 on my way to my first bearing witness retreat at Auschwitz. Bearing witness retreat that I joined without really knowing what one was, and it was really transformative. I know a number of you have been on them and have, I think, found it to be similar as well. Quite moving. That was when I met Bernie for the first time and when I first came across the three tenets. 2010, I had first been introduced this lifetime to the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings in 1994, and I had been blessed to spend a lot of time with Tibetan teachers primarily, but also Vipassana teachers, and heard many teachings and spent a lot of time reading lots of commentaries. And I was quite the student of the Dharma, and I spent a lot of time reading and really appreciating some of the deep commentaries, but much of it was right here and not here. Yes, when I would do retreats and do good meditation retreats, or good would be a judgment, I'm not sure always applies, but when I would do the meditation retreats, there were times when I could embody the gift of the Dharma and could understand or feel and embody that wisdom and the compassion and the freedom that provides us, the freedom from that sense of self, that jail of self, as I call it. But I had never been called to call any of those folks that I came across as teacher. I'd never been, never felt appropriate to ask them to be my teacher. I took teachings from them and spent a lot of time with them and sat at their feet at many teachings, but never really felt a call to ask them to be my teacher. Bernie, blessed to be able to spend time with him. As I got to know him, I asked him to be my teacher, and I went through the sort of classic stories one hears about trying to engage a teacher to be your teacher, where I asked him once and he said, "Nah, I don't think so." And I thought, okay, well, I guess I have to ask him another time later. So several months later, I asked him again. No, it was more to it than no, but it was no. And I waited several more months thinking, oh, of course, well, 3 is the magic number that you're supposed to ask. So I'll ask him a third time. And when I asked him the third time, he said, no, again. And what he said was, no, because I don't like the duality of teacher and student. Let's just hang out. So I said, oh, cool. So as we did, and as I really took advantage of absorbing and trying to embody the 3 tenets, I came to really appreciate the greater depth behind those 3 tenets as I sat and studied with Bernie over the years. And they're short, obviously, 3 tenets, 6 words. They're easy to remember. And I think being short, they're easier to embody. The Heart Sutra is a great sutra, but there's much more going on for me anyway than I can feel like I can carry in my body each moment. But one of the things that I want to talk about today, and I've never really shared when I've spoken of the 3 tenets before, is that as simple and clean and new as they are, new in the sense that I think Bernie only pulled them together in the 90s, they're based on the classic foundational Buddhist teachings. So it's not, and I think that was something I didn't really appreciate for some time. I just thought this was cool and it works. But in reading much of what Bernie has written and in listening to other teachings and sort of hanging out together, it was obvious that there were 3 of these classic foundational teachings that informed his creation of the 3 tenets. The first one are what we know as the 3 treasures: the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And one of the things that I loved about Bernie was he would frequently add a little bit to that. Instead of just Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, he would say, be Buddha, be Dharma, be Sangha. So be Buddha, be the enlightened one, be at one, be emptiness, be oneness, be the awakened nature of all. And he called that not knowing. And be Dharma, be the world of forms, be phenomena, be the manyness, the diversity that we know, be the ocean of wisdom and compassion. He called that bear witness. And be Sangha, be the harmony that exists between Buddha and Dharma, between oneness and manyness, between emptiness and form. This harmony is the fact that the Buddha and the Dharma are the same thing. They are distinct and the same simultaneously. So be harmony. Be the interdependence of all. Be action. The second classic simple teaching, the 3 pure precepts. I think you would probably all know this one. Cease from evil is the first. Do good is a second. Do good for others is a third. Dogen Zenji called cease from evil the abiding place of laws and rules of all Buddhas. It is the state of non-duality, of non-separation, the state of not knowing. Of the second pure precept, do good, Dogen says, this is the Dharma of supreme enlightenment. This is the way of all beings. And are we truly open to all? Do we approach each moment without thinking we have the answer? And the sixth patriarch defined practice as the state of mind where there is no separation between subject and object, no space between you and me, between up and down, between right and wrong, even between left and right. And Bernie called such practice bearing witness. So while the first and second precepts deal with ourselves, the third, do good for others, obviously addresses others. Ceasing from evil emphasizes not increasing the amount of delusion in the world. Doing good emphasizes increasing the amount of clarity in the world. Doing good for others activates in us all those spheres that we don't see as being us, engaging all of existence, taking action. The last one I want to refer to as being a foundation for the three tenets is a real favorite verse of mine called Sandokai. It's a classic in the Zen lineages. Many of you may know it. It's known as the identity of relative and absolute. It was written in the 8th century by a Chinese Chan master who was a grandson, Dharma grandson of the sixth patriarch. And when you dissect or analyze the three kanji for Sandokai, synonyms for the word san are dharma and form, as in the Heart Sutras, form is emptiness, or the relative. Synonyms for do, Sandokai, the do, are sameness or equality, Buddha, emptiness, the absolute. Kai is a difficult word to translate, to express the unification of absolute and relative such that their respective sense of sameness and difference is preserved, yet they are perceived as wholly interdependent. It's the meaning of the word is in the Heart Sutras, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. A synonym for Kai is Sangha. So Sandokai is therefore the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It is form is emptiness. It is practice is enlightenment. When we say that Kai means Sangha in the sense of harmony, we mean the harmonious relationship that exists between these two hands, the absolute and relative, where they are clasped as not one and not two. The harmony in question is nothing but the fact that the Buddha, emptiness and absolute, and Dharma, form and relative, are the same thing. As such, they interpenetrate freely without obstruction, action without separation. So back to the three tenets. Not knowing, letting go of fixed ideas about yourself, others, and the universe. The elimination of any trace of separation. Not knowing, I mean, the classic example of not knowing that causes confusion is people think, well, I know how to use a hammer. I know how to put a nail in a piece of wood, so I know that. Well, that's knowledge and experience, as opposed to seeing something and knowing that that problem is just like a nail and you need to hammer it. We need to be aware of our experiences and our learned knowledge, but not to bring that that experience to a moment in a way that interferes with your ability to be open to what it is, to what's really happening. Which leads us to bearing witness, so that if you can maintain a not knowing mind, a non-judging mind, a mind that and heart that are open to experiencing what is in front of you without judging, and you can bear witness to it, see the differences, feel the differences, hear the differences, and not judge. And from that not knowing and that bearing witness arises the third, which is taking action. In the past, we used to call it loving action, and there's been many, many hours and days of discussion about whether it should be taking action or loving action as the third tenet. What we've come to as a community to agree on is taking action. I personally prefer loving action. And I prefer loving action because if we truly bring our heart in an open way to each moment of our lives without knowing, truly bearing witness to what's happening, I think it's our heart that calls us to do whatever action we take. From that's where I come with the idea of it's truly loving action, not just taking action. But the official one is taking action, which lets me remember that one of the things I like to share about Bernie, one of the things he was very clear about, not just on the three tenets, but on anything he said, is it's just my opinion. So everything was just under this umbrella of it's just my opinion, including that opinion, right? So whether it's taking action or loving action, if we enter each moment truly open in our heart and mind, therefore approaching the moment without knowing what needs to be done or knowing what the problem is or knowing that we're going to fix it or anything, we're truly just observing it and bearing witness without a separation, becoming that situation, becoming that moment. Then whatever there will be, whatever action arises out of that is the third tenet. And frequently, what happens is there's no action that arises because there's nothing that one's called to do. And I think it's so beautiful that these are like they're listed 1, 2, 3, but it's an iterative process. There's it's not knowing and then bearing witness and then taking action. The not knowing and the bearing witness are really together, and taking action arises out of that. And maybe taking action, maybe there is no action, in which case you're still not knowing, bearing witness without knowing. And it's just, you're with the moment and letting it unfold in a way that helps you reduce suffering and experience the world in a more free way. One of the core practices of ZPI, as I mentioned earlier, is bearing witness retreats. And one of the things that I think that bearing witness retreats does for many of us, certainly who are experiencing our locked in the Western world kind of bubble of existence with our comfort and everything, which keeps us unaware of the fact that we are stuck in our own self-view of things, is to take the plunge into the unfamiliar. Going to a place like Auschwitz, with the history of the horror that it had and that energy is still there, or going to walk the killing fields of Rwanda or of Cambodia, or of seeing what it's like in the experience on the streets of major cities or small towns around the world on street retreats, or to go down into Alabama and other places where the racial history in America is so raw, going to Native American lands to see where and how they're living. Takes us, that plunge into something unfamiliar gives us the opportunity to observe, bear witness without knowing, and open ourselves up to being more connected with other. And when we see someone who doesn't look like us, who has different customs from ours, who speaks a different language, if we don't approach that in a way of openness, we can typically fall into the habit of dehumanizing them. They're not like us, they're different, therefore they're not as human as we are. And that leads us to many of the problems that we still see today. I mean, that's part of human nature. So it's important to appreciate life in all of its different manifestations, its messiness. Sometimes people focus too much on the oneness of life, the absolute, if you will, without seeing its diversity and accepting its diversity as part of that oneness, and without really understanding that both of them are interrelated. People frequently will establish a limited standard of what it is to be human. When we take that plunge into the unfamiliar, truly open, then we have a chance to, again, step out of our sense of self and see what's going on around us, and to hopefully be one with what's going on around us. And one of the examples, if we can take action without separation, if we can get into a situation where we are identifying with that situation, we become that situation, then we are able to take an action very much like the action, I mean, Bernie used to describe, he's got oneness down as far as his own body is concerned. He doesn't think of his right hand's different from his left hand. It's all part of him, but he knows his right hand's different from his left hand, but there's a oneness of Bernie, he used to say. And in that oneness of Bernie, if his right hand gets cut and it's bleeding, his left hand doesn't say, oh, look, there's a hand that needs to be helped. Maybe I should help it. Or no, I don't think I will, because I don't want to get dirty. I'll get blood all over myself. Or yeah, maybe if I help him, people will think I'm pretty cool and groovy and a compassionate person. No, there's none of that thinking. The left hand just goes to the right hand and does what he can to stop the bleeding. There's not a thought. It's just intrinsic. It just happens. Just like a mother doesn't have to think about whether or not she's going to take care of her child. I would add, dads feel that way too. Maybe not as much as mothers, but they feel that way too. But you're not judging, you're not saying I'm good, I'm doing something great, or how great am I, or maybe I won't, or maybe I'll get dirty. You just do it. That's when you have really attained the goal of non-separation, the goal of being at one with others. One of the words that we need to be careful about, and one symptom of separation, of duality, is the word why. If we can eliminate the why from our lives, that makes it much easier for us to truly bear witness. If we're trying to bear witness and we're asking ourselves, why is this happening? That gets in the way of us truly bearing witness to understand it and be with what's happening. So when I bear witness, when one bears witness, one is open to what is without asking why. Just witness and be open to whatever action the heart calls us to make, if any. And bearing witness, of course, can be done, really best done in every moment of everyday life. One doesn't need to just think of doing it when you go on a bearing witness retreat. When you're sitting at the table and you're having a dispute with a family member about something, it's a great time to practice. Like, well, what's really happening here? Why, I'm getting lost in arguing my own case and trying to, let me just bear witness to what's going on and what is the right action that I can bring to this to heal. So I find, for me, if I remember to be the three tenets each moment, it's a deep sense of freedom and a wonderful deep breath of peace. So maybe that's enough for now. Love to have any questions, love to sort of open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Our group is small enough today.
But you know what I'm just remembering, Jeff? I
Yeah.
asked for and got a very nice question from David, which I did not address.
Go ahead, Grant. Then we'll go back and open up.
I'll avoid the embarrassment of having David have to ask me again. I love the question. What's the space between bearing witness, or between taking action and bearing witness, between not knowing and bearing witness and taking action? And notice that I'm not putting them in the order that we usually present them, because there's no space. There should be no space. That when you said, what is the space? I immediately thought of the Tibetan word bardo, the in between. And each moment, of course, has its own bardo. So there's always some space everywhere, but the spaces, I think, dissolve if we really just be with what is. Like, what's the space between my left hand helping my right hand when it's bleeding? You know, it all just interrelates and does it. So it'd be my opinion, just my opinion, that there really is no space between them. If we're truly embodying the three tenets, I think, as they can best be embodied. Eileen has a question, I think.
Yeah, I see Eileen's got her hand
I
up.
might as well throw it out there. This all sounds wonderful and beautiful, but frankly, very difficult. And, you know, I'm just thinking of, for example, last night dealing with my son who has an extreme addiction problem and he's on the street. And when I see him, I'm trying, you know, when I see the suffering that he's experiencing, it's hard for me not to get triggered into wanting to fix. And also, you know, getting angry sometimes too. You know, it's a complicated situation, but it's very hard for me to not know, number one, because I do think I know. I know I have to somehow let go of that. I think it would help our relationship, my preconceived, you know, judging that I know. But this is hard to do, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So maybe some ideas, or if we could talk about that a little bit. I guess awareness obviously is important, and, you know, to notice the triggers. I like the Shanti Deva, you know, idea of remaining like a log, you know, that in a way I think can be helpful in instructing me to not know, to keep my mouth shut, but I still think I know in my head at any rate. So I think this is, I really think it's beautiful, but I find it very difficult.
Spot on. I agree. I sadly had experience with that with a son as well. He's no longer with us, but there were times it wasn't just about being angry that he was addicted or was lost in that world, but one could feel unsafe. I don't know whether you've had to experience that.
Yes.
I imagine so.
Yes.
So, yeah, okay. I guess I don't know, and I'm just going to bear witness. Maybe I'm about to get stabbed by that kitchen knife. What's my action? Yeah, no, I didn't advertise this as easy to follow. It's not. I mean, one of the things that we sometimes forget is, and Bernie used to say it so well, Zen is life and life is Zen. I mean, he wasn't the first one to say that. In all of its ugliness and all of its beauty, it's just, that's what it is. How do we roll each moment to serve ourselves and those and others best? And if, when one has a lot of scar tissue as parents with addicted children and sometimes violent children, there's a lot of scar tissue. It's hard to not be triggered. It's hard. But I think one finds if you can avoid that trigger, take a breath. You know, that old counsel of taking a breath allows you to step away from the immediate knowing, and you have a chance of being that log maybe, but it's practice. It's hard, but if one can stay with it, my experience has been, it's better for me and those around me. And I fail a lot, but when I can be with it, when I can embody that, and I can't tell you how to show up when your son says this or doesn't do that or threatens this. I mean, you know, it's each moment's different, and what the right response sometimes is no response. And one of the things that, because I remember hearing Bernie get this question, well, I sometimes, you know, I do something, I think it's the right thing, and it turns out it was a bigger mess than if I hadn't done anything. He said, but was your motivation pure from your heart? Then that's okay. What's going on now? Bear witness to what's going on now. Again, not knowing, not going, I'm a fool, I shouldn't have done that, and beat yourself up. Truly, let all that go. Okay, this is what's happening now. What can I do? And again, the answer is frequently nothing. It's for me anyway. I mean, and but stay with it and try to just, like, when you're getting, you know, the problem, when I get triggered, I don't even know I'm triggered, right? And then when my wife says, you're triggered, I'm not triggered. You're triggered.
Yeah. That's
not when I'm in the moment, right? I mean, I'm in the moment, but I'm not in a good way in the moment. Yes, thank you. I completely acknowledge it is difficult, but that's what the Dharma is supposed to be for, is to help us navigate the dukkha of life. And if it were easy, then you guys wouldn't be here and I wouldn't either. We'd just be like grooving along easy. But that's the challenge, and the joy of life is overcoming those things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps.
It does help, especially the not doing anything, in a way. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I don't do that. And so I think I might try that today.
Well, and again, that I just sort of remember coming back to loving action is one of the things we've heard, certainly from about parents and teachers, is they need to have tough love.
Yeah,
and tough love means you got to let them crash. I mean, and it's hurt, it's painful, and you never know whether they've reached the bottom yet. And sometimes they reach the bottom and they die.
That's right.
And that's what happens. But when you watch what the consequences were of getting involved in ways that weren't productive, you just prolonged and delayed the hopeful turning when they have a chance to break out of it.
Thanks, Grant.
Yep.
Thank you, Eileen. Someone else had their hand up a minute ago, but it looks like it went back down again. There you go, Carla. I thought that might have been you. Hi. Carla, you're muted. You're muted, Carla.
Thank you, Jeff. I didn't want to cut anyone off. I was a little quick on the trigger there. So yeah, I do have a question, and it's actually very related. It's a similar topic to what Eileen shared, and it gave me a little bit of courage to ask it. But I work in recovery, and I love these tenets. They're so, they just seem so clear to me that they're very functional when I put them into practice. And for me, I've had a conversation with a friend about this morning, and I don't know if I'm on right track. So I'd like some feedback on this. But I see a difference for me practicing these tenets, like letting go versus surrendering, especially in addiction, because, you know, I'm working with people that I see like letting go as a process of like, we know we have to do this. It's very cognitive. And that might be in situations of addiction, working with family members, tough love, that type of thing. And then I see surrender. There's like an element of like surrendering, and there has to be safety there for me. And there has to be a component of like knowing that I have what I need to get through this, and that this is what is happening. This is life, and I'm going to surrender to it. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Is there a difference between letting go and surrendering when you're practicing these tenets? Can you let go knowing it's very difficult and hard? I don't know if I'm making sense there, but just this is how I kind of see it sometimes for me. There are moments I can surrender very easily and just go with what is and allow it to be an experience of oneness. And I feel that. And then there are moments where it's literally like blood, sweat, and tears. I am letting go, but it's very, very difficult in personal life. And I don't know if you have any words, if I'm even making sense, but if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, words, right? As I was listening to you, and thanks for the question, but I found myself thinking in one moment as I was listening to you describe one and the other, that they were the same and then they were different and then they were the same again. In terms of like, I think it depends on how one wants to use it. I don't remember using the word surrender at all when I was speaking today. And I think for me, and it's just my opinion, surrender implies a giving up, almost like there's a shadow victim or something in there. Like I surrender, you win. But one hears of people surrendering to the moment and being, but I don't like that term myself. But if it works, then it works. Letting go is another word that can be misinterpreted and be a little bit tricky. Neither one of them, for me, take you to the point of actually being one with. That doesn't mean that they don't mean that for you, but for me, when an addiction is such particularly when the addict is living in your home, I mean, it's tricky. If I had when my son was living with us, if I had the three tenets to work with, I can only guess, but my guess would be that it would have helped me and him a lot. Just because I sort of naturally was able to do it because I was working with the Dharma at that time and trying to pause and be with things, but yeah, I'm not really answering your question. Sorry. Yeah. Surrender, though, I find it a little challenging for me, the word surrender. But if it works for you, use it. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, that's, yeah, that tough love thing, letting things sometimes need us to leave them alone so they can unfold with the consequences that are begging to be the karma that's begging to come out. Easy to say when you're not smelling it and hearing it and feeling it, but when you can, that helps.
Grant, if I could add on to what you said, and again, it's just my perspective or my opinion. I feel similarly about that word surrender as you expressed, because for me it implies a little bit of kind of not so much necessarily giving up, but kind of moving on to the next thing or paying attention to something else. And as you explained, Grant, so well, even though these three tenets are presented in a linear way, they're not linear. And they can go backwards, they can go inside out, they can go all at once. And in my mind, letting go has to coexist with bearing witness. And bearing witness, as we describe, is, not turning away from both the joys and the pain of life, of the universe. So it's hard for me to feel surrendering if I'm not turning away from that horror, the genocide or the racism or the violence or the death. As long as I'm still looking at it, then I'm very much still engaged with it. But I'm letting it be the way that it is. I don't know if that makes it more confusing or if I've obscured the point.
Well, I have an opinion. I hear those interpretations of surrender. I feel there's also a devotional aspect to surrender, a reverential aspect to surrender as well. Which leads into not knowing yet and finding elegant action. That's my opinion.
David, thank you. I found myself thinking when you spoke of reverential, I was raised Christian, and one hears surrender yourself to Christ a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's or Yahweh or whatever, but so yeah, thank you for that. You know, it's yeah, I mean, Carla, these are just opinions too, right? I mean, it's whatever. If it works, it works. I mean, that's the important thing. I mean, you can call it a holy cow moment. If that works, cool. But maybe that's more for Hindus. I don't know. Thanks, David.
We've got a few more minutes, everybody. I imagine there are some questions out there. You're among friends here, so feel welcomed and comfortable to raise your hand if you have something to contribute or a question or want Grant to revisit something that he said. Heidi, hi.
Hi. Kind of, I feel apologetic about bringing up this subject when we're having such, even though we're not, this is not just theoretical today. We already getting into heavy things. But you know, right now it's fall is coming. It's a beautiful season coming along, but you know, this next year in the US is kind of scary to think about politically. Whatever sides, you know, wherever somebody is with it, but just it kind of like considering how things went the last 4 to 8 years, it feels a little like we're in a moment before things get really hairy. And as far as opinion, you know, I love this lovely little tack on that we can say as just my opinion. And I do that, you know, when I'm, you know, I use it in conversation with family members or so, you know, and it is so handy. And it's a reminder to myself. But I know in the culture that I was raised in, there's the person who knows what the right answer is and is there to tell you that this is what it is, whether it's religion, politics, don't wear white after Labor Day or all that stuff. There is a right answer, and you are lucky you're in the family that you got born into this, you know, you're one of the lucky ones. You get to hear what the right answer is. And so I kind of not despair, but I feel like when you have a softer, gentler way of trying to like move through all of these things that are say coming, you know, I guess have to let go of getting that same respect that culture expects. You know, you're not going to stand up and tell them how and be aggressive in that way. And this is what it is. And it's, I feel kind of just on a personal note, I feel kind of sad that some of my own children even will be like, it would take eons, for me to like demonstrate to them in that softer way that, you don't have, you can have it, just my opinion. We can be gentler or something. So kind of putting that all out there is, how these three tenets can sort of like, we can, to have a little bit of trust and maintain a little bit of trust and love for those three tenets in this upcoming season, even when they're not maybe respected.
Well, we can only manage our own behavior. We can only do our best to manage our own thoughts and our own feelings, our own emotions. And we frequently screw up on all of those. That's what we can do. And the opinion, reminding ourselves that that's my opinion and framing it that way so the other person realizes I'm just saying that's my opinion, depending on how you say it, doesn't necessarily accomplish that either, right? But what's most important when you say that's my opinion, you have to remember that whatever they're saying is just their opinion too. And if it goes against that proper pure breeding that you had, and it makes you, well, you're wearing pink on November 1 or white on November 1. I mean, so what? It's those opinions that we have. I'm speaking of our opinions. Our opinions are what cause us to suffer, not their opinions. Because our opinions are the ones that go, well, that's wrong. Just, you hear what it is, it is. Now, having said that, it's very important not to be confused with being placid. I mean, I'm just sitting here and, oh, they have opinions. Oh, they're going to kill somebody. Or, oh, they're going to destroy the economy, or they're going to destroy democracy. Or, oh, okay. Without knowing what the answer should be, or without knowing what the issue really is, bear witness to what you see is going on and what arises in your kitchen of ingredients that you can do to help. Maybe nothing now. Maybe you need to keep bearing witness, doing your best to maintain a not knowing mind and see what arises. For me, that political thing, I've been walking the halls of Congress since 2013 because I'm concerned about climate. And I will tell you, I take a deep breath before I go into an office that I know might be difficult. And I just remember, don't know, bear witness. Let's see what happens. Let's find the common ground. Let's connect as humans before we can talk about whether or not there's an issue that we need to try to address. The fear you have and the reality of uncomfortable change for potentially millions of people in the next, pick your issue, whether it's politics or climate or whatever, over the next couple of years and a decade or two, massive, I mean, it's there. And Carla, forgive me, I'm going to go back to the surrender for a second. I don't think it's right to surrender. Oh, that's just going to happen. There's nothing I can do about it. I love the term of a spiritual warrior, of a Dharma warrior. But one needs to bring that action to bear with wisdom. What is the best action? And depending on the person who's observing, who's witnessing, two people who have big hearts and open minds, the two actions that they may come up with are completely different, maybe. And that's okay. I mean, there's no judgment there. It's just, what are we each called to do to help reduce suffering?
Part of what I'm hearing there, what's coming through for me is like, maybe to focusing on less on the personalities could maybe lighten the, because it's certainly very easy to get caught up in the personalities.
Oh, for sure, particularly when they want you to, particularly then, right? So one of the things we've heard over the years is if someone kills someone, pick the ultimate, we can hate the act of killing, but we don't benefit from hating the person that killed. It's the act we hate, not the person. We don't know why that happened. Yeah, it gets a little edgy, this conversation, but the point is the personalities create triggers in your own opinions and prevent you from seeing a path that might be helpful because you're fighting the personality in your head and your heart. You're like, eh.
Thanks, Heidi. Is it Fordham? Fordham, you have your hand up?
Yes, and I apologize for not having the video while I'm traveling here, but thank you all for this. And Grant, thank you for the presentation lead today. And thanks for everybody coming out here. It's really a great reminder of the three tenets and to see them through other people's eyes. You know, I went to India with Bernie in 2012, and that changed my life, man, in a good way. But, you know, I've since got a Master of Divinity from Naropa University. And I was working as a spiritual advisor at a drug rehab for a couple of years. And the three tenets really informed that work because, you know, you'd show up there and you wouldn't know what was going on. I mean, you had an idea, people are coming off drugs, but everything's going sideways. So it's very hard to get to a don't know mind, but I try. And then bearing witness there and then trying to take some compassionate action, you know, or turn people into recovery or some kind of surrender in a positive wisdom way, right? But, you know, traveling with Bernie was just, I tell people like sometimes, you know, he would just be like, you know, the clown, and other times he'd be joking around like that Brooklyn Jew that he was, you know, and other times he would look into your eyes as that Zen master, and I would feel my spine straighten and be like, what was that? You know, he was a powerful dude. And one time the subject came up, you know, it was the really big thing, like the 1%ers back then. And he just kept saying, man, there is no other, man. There is no other, man. You know, he'd always say that, man, you know, which is so cool. And when I went to see the election results, you know, the election before last at the Boulder Theater, I'm in Boulder still here where Naropa is, and I was in disbelief. And I heard his voice saying, there is no other, man. There is no other. Like, where am I drawing the line, you know, with my cognitive dissonance? That's me, man. That's my relative ignorance and attachment and aversion. You know, how can I love everything and everyone, man? You know, very difficult, very, very difficult. And, I had a friend who came back from Afghanistan, and it really exemplified the, you know, not knowing, bearing witness in some kind of action. He said that they kept on building this well for this village, and every few weeks it would get destroyed. And they'd be like, what the hell, man? We're trying to help these people. And the other option was for the women, it was like almost a 2-day journey to the nearest water source. So they had to go stay someplace and then go to the well and then stay someplace and come back. And they found out the women were destroying the well because they wanted to have this time away from the men that were oppressing them. They had a 4-day journey to be by themselves, go get the water and come back. And that blew my mind. I was like, yeah, if they had gone there and said, hey, we don't know what's going on. Let's let our gender be aside and bear witness to, like, these women want to go down to this well that takes them 2 days to get to, and let that be, man. And then ask them how they wanted to be helped. And just my time with Bernie, like, he just embodied that. Like, going through India, he would just, you know, use all of his mindfulness or meditation, you know, Satori skills, you know, and be like, what is going on here, man? You know, what's this? You know, like the great sage says. So, you know, and not knowing is most intimate, you know. So anyway, man, I just wanted to chime in. It's great to be here. Thank you all for the reminder of the three tenets.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Speaking of helping, one of the things that I loved Bernie, one of the many things I love that Bernie taught me was to try to use the word serve as opposed to help. And you can't see this for them because you're not on the video, but when he said, if you're helping someone, you're handing down, you're above them and you're handing them something. And when you're serving, you're handing up. And it's not, you're not creating a superior position in your mind if you're thinking of helping. If you're serving, then you can have the chance of thinking of yourself as an equal or a subordinate, but you're not superior to them. So
that's right on, man, because, you know, we use the word support at the rehab, you know, and my supervisor had to teach me that. He's like, well, helping is a little bit more like our agenda. How will we support them in their recovery? And then it releases you from like being like, okay, you got to get sober. It's like, do you want to get sober, man? Like, I can help you do that. but it's really me supporting you. But and anyway, Grant, good to see you. I think I met you in like 2014 down in the Shivananda ashram when Bernie had that weekend at Bernie's. And
yeah, I remember.
So good to see you. Good
I'm
to
still
see
in
you.
Boulder.
Yeah, right on, man. We'll have to get together. Take it easy.
Yeah, you too. Well, I think we're up, Jeff. I just want to thank everybody for showing up. It was I always appreciate the opportunity to share the three tenets. And as I said earlier, this is the first time I've actually wanted to reach back and to talk about what they were based on, because I hadn't really thought about that before. These three tenets, they're helpful, but there's a rich lineage there that I think is helpful to appreciate too. So you're really living the Dharma if you can live the three tenets, all of it. Anything
Wonderful.
else, Jeff, to close?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Grant, for taking the time to do this and sharing your heart and your wisdom with us all. And I want to thank everybody for attending and remind that this series continues. Our next class like this will be October 9th at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and it will be Introduction to Meditation. And a good friend of mine here in Boulder will be teaching that class, and she's one of the best meditation teachers I know. And in an hour, she really gets to it. I encourage everybody. We'd love to have you as members of Zen Peacemakers. I know many of you are. It's free. It takes about 30 seconds on the website just to click, and sign up for the newsletter. That's how you know what we're doing, and presumably maybe you all have done so already. So thank you all for taking your time with us today, and we hope to see you another time in the future. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of someone else.